Welcome to our first sign surgery live stream. This is all a bit experimental, but we hope it will be another really useful and educational resource for all the BSGA members and anyone else from within the sign and graphics industry that would like to join us. If you've got any questions, if you're watching us on LinkedIn, do drop them into the chat box to the side. But first of all, I'd like to introduce to Craig Brown, who's as always with us. Morning, Craig.
Good morning. Hope everyone's okay. I'm looking forward to...
Well, I can't hear you, which is a shame. Oh, it's because I'm not connected. Yeah.
Am I...
There you go. Now it was me.
That's you. Oh, okay. I'm one of those on my end. Living in the sticks, as they say.
Yeah. Good stuff. So, without further ado, we'll sort of crack on. I'll try and keep an eye on questions, what have you, as they come in. But we've got a few to sort of keep us going and to get us going. We're going to be talking about subcontracting, trade supply, it's a big topic. But I know you get a lot of questions about this, Craig, so perhaps you could frame the issue for us.
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of interlink. I suspect it's there's been a theme and a run on LinkedIn recently, and I'd say it's the small to medium-sized sign companies where they are becoming stressed with dealing with subcontractors, and that can be from having the product manufactured, it can be having the product actually fitted, it can be sourcing materials, and to a certain degree we all have that. We're ordering materials on a day-to-day basis. Not many of us carry huge amounts of stock, partly down to cash flow, partly down to business practices, the good old just-in-time. Again, be careful, don't want to upset suppliers here by saying this, but let them carry the stock and we call it off as we actually need it. I'm just seeing that there's a degree of, should we say, I don't want to put it down to lack of communication. We've got to this stage now, we fire an email off with an order and we assume that the order has been processed and met. Again, maybe we put that down to actually running software in the background. We've priced a product, we've had a quote that's actually come in, but we've never had that interaction to check that the product actually is available and can be called off at short notice. And I'm detecting a level of stress coming out because it then becomes somebody else's problem. Well, we own the business, it is our problem, so we're responsible for seeing that right way through. Our customer has entrusted us with that process, so therefore we have to manage the process right the way through, from the way that we deal with the client in the first interaction to getting the quote for the product material, and then actually from that product arriving, us dressing the substrate and then moving the product onto the client, whether that be a delivery or whether that be a fit. But I put it down to actually, again, this lack of, if I say simplistic, human interaction, the good old-fashioned telephone conversation or phone call to make sure that the product you're expecting on Friday, you might call on the Wednesday to double check it's still due to arrive. You might even call on the Monday even just to double check it's actually arriving. But it is almost the lack of someone wanting to take, or it feels that way, the lack of someone wanting to take responsibility for the process. I'm not trying to be too simplistic here. I'm just trying to say that when you speak to somebody and you say, why have you become stressed? Well, I put the order in, now I haven't heard anything. Well, have you called? Well, I have called, but nobody's called me back. Well, if no one's called me back, I'm back on the phone to chase it up. So again, we're all busy, but we have to make sure that we maintain that process. And if you go back to the good old-fashioned project manager, rather than being a software, they might have had a Gantt chart or a spreadsheet that they used, but they were still in charge. They were still double-checking. They had alarm. The nice thing with the software, actually, products due delivered on the Friday, I put an alarm in place to tell me to follow up with the supplier on the Wednesday to check what the delivery time is going to be and can we have a special courier, whatever it happens to be. And I'm just starting to detect a little bit, if I can't produce it myself, I'm not going to bother quoting. It's starting to come through because actually I don't want that stress. And to me, that seems a real shame. So, sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded
Yeah, that's fine. I think trade supplies is an important part of the industry, but I guess what you're suggesting there is that if you're as a sign company, you're not getting the communication, the confidence from your trade supplier, you may just refuse to take a job. Is that sort of what you're seeing?
Yeah, and I suspect, again, things have changed and gone are the times where we had 25, 30 very large sign companies that produced absolutely everything in-house. It is now more common for the smaller, if I'm going to say slightly more reactive company who, that they have a number of jobs that kind of come through. So therefore they have to create a relationship with a supply chain that they can rely on. And again, I might even be as bold as to say that the fact we end up shopping around and therefore we don't build a trusted relationship with one or two core suppliers, which I think is a little bit of a shame to lose. In fact, we're worried about losing a job for a few pounds, and actually then we might lose good qualities to the supply chain that's actually causing this stress in the first place. So I come back to maybe the suppliers can help educate us. Maybe they can talk us through the lead times that they need for products and projects as well. Because again, I suspect they get equally frustrated. They're tendering the same as we are. So if we don't win the work, they don't win the work, and they've wasted time. So this is part of this is an education process. And I know the longer you've been in the trade, the more flavour you have about how you do it. But we'll all get that process where we get frustrated. I put a price into a client, and the client hasn't come back to me, and so therefore I can't go back to the supply chain to place the order. So again, it's that little domino. One needs to fall over to get the rest of the process running.
I can see the issue. So, you got some advice on how you would stay on top of project timescales when you're working with subcontractors, trade suppliers, making sure that the goalposts aren't moving around without you knowing.
Yeah, and again, this comes back, and I'm seeing it more with projects and refits, where we've quoted on work, and a project has been run, and then at the 11th hour, the customer or the buyer has come back and said, "Oh, actually, now you're in. Could you just..." And you maybe half a dozen more offices to actually have window manifestations on. It might be the directory system needs to be completed or be changed. They might have had a change of tenant within the office, and actually they want to fit it in at the same time, so there's no disruption. And that's a great thing to have that relationship. But again, it's the time scales of actually having the confidence to ask the questions when you're going through. Maybe the order is now placed. You're actually working through, and you can actually ask up front, is there anything else to actually be added? It won't cut every issue out, but the amount of times I've actually had that conversation with a buyer, yeah, actually, now you've mentioned it, we are expecting another tenant in. And maybe we're talking about our diary, what we can fit in. So, we're contractually, we've followed a contract process. We've got our terms and conditions. They've probably given us a purchase order with their terms and conditions. We're just trying to meet their expectations. And again, that's that management process that we're also eager to say yes because we're worried about losing the client. That sometimes we have to say, well, actually, to get this done, I need the order, I need the material, I need the whatever it is by a certain date. So you set the process, the guidelines for the client to actually to follow. And the fact is that you be proactive, you call, you ask. And I know people will challenge me and say that's a really simplistic approach. But it actually does cut down those surprise calls, and it shows the fact that you're focused on that job for the client.
Thank you. We have had a comment on LinkedIn. I'm doing multiple jobs here, so bear with me, Craig. Sam Armstrong at Make It Happen is asking, I think as an industry we need to try and slow it down. Everyone rushes, books installers before the confirmed date of goods are delivered, and then end up delivering the day the install is taking place. They're not allowing for traffic or any contingency to be put in place. 8 weeks for DFS take 8 weeks for sofa. We get 10 working days at maximum majority of the time. So how do we get clients to give us the time that we need
Well,
apart from being incredibly bossy like my team are.
well,
So I'm just reading it out, Sam. Any suggestions, Greg?
well, I know, but to that degree, we are our own worst enemy. And Sam's right. We've kind of put the bar, and the client now expects us to actually exceed the bar. It's a bit like setting a world record every time. Well, you did it for me last time. Can you do it a little bit quicker this time? And again, this is about the process of actually having the communication chain actually set. I had a number of buyers that we used to work with that actually outright told me that their challenge was always to get 5% off the price of a job. I didn't know that right at the outset of the relationship with the client, but I developed a relationship with them sooner. So you could say that I just added the 5% on to take it off, but it just meant that we had a much better working relationship. I understood the processes. They let me know things that were actually coming up. And when you're in a tender process, slightly different because we're all being thrown into the pot. But the relationship that you create with a buyer actually should be something that lasts the lifetime of your relationship with that client. Buyers might move on, might be new introduction, you get a new client, but we have to try and take back an element of control. There will always be curveballs that get thrown in, but one of Sam's comments is about the product actually arriving and on the timescale. A lot of us are actually in relatively small manufacturing process facilities. Rather, you might have 2, 3, 4,000 square feet. Sorry, old-fashioned imperial measurements there. Size unit, and I don't have the facility to store a flex face. I don't have the ability to store a number of boxes. I don't have the flexibility to store the extrusion, so I want it delivered on site. So that strategic alignment of product arriving at the same time that the fitters arrives is actually where we're coming from. But that's the other comment I'm making. I'm now seeing people saying, I don't want the aggravation of that work. We had a large, not us, the client I was actually helping, had a number of flex faces going up. And they've got to the stage where just the aggravation of actually trying to line everything up is causing him so much stress. I don't know whether it's worth doing the job. But then you look at the profit margin, the time it takes, the regularity of the work that he's getting over a 12-month period. Come back to processes, and we would then start to talk about, this is exactly part of where the conversation has come from. Everything that he did was email. It's great to follow the chain, but there was no human interaction. There was no conversation, no relationship that had been developed with the supply chain.
Well, it's easier said than done, because this will go across every part of the installation. We've had another comment from Joe Lacey at Innova Solutions, and he agrees with Sam that as a tapes and adhesive supplier, they're often getting the call the day before, needing products for the next day, and you've got to manage that across lots and lots of different products and installers and everything else.
But this comes back to that just in time for everything that we do. And I'm frequently amazed that people actually don't carry stock of some of the really basic materials, because if I order it by 5 o'clock this evening, it will be with me tomorrow. Well, actually, there's a jam on the M6. All of a sudden, that's not with me, and actually, your world comes to an end. So it's a real fine balancing act, and I do understand that you have to change your mindset to the products. But if you're actually managing your business properly and you're predicting the workflow, and you can look back over the last 18 months to see what material you've used over a particular period. It might be in the summer, window manifestations are a big part because actually people want to shade windows, because of the heat. It could, so at least you can do some predicting. And we were often pushed by the vinyl suppliers. How much vinyl are you going to buy over the next 6 months as a group? So you were looking at what the group were actually doing. And again, it's a little bit fingered there, but I can gauge, I can give them a rough estimate of where we're actually going to be. So that the communication chain, maybe this is an ideal opportunity to actually educate. We're running a sign surgery. Maybe the suppliers would like to give us some feedback, and actually the sign companies can come push back the other way. Well, these are the issues we have somewhere, and there's a happy medium that we can all arrive at.
For sure. Sam has also pointed out that they have a production flyer, like a PDF, that shows the process of manufacture for fabricated signs. If anyone would like to see this, they're happy to share. So we'll put the link on this afterwards when we put it out after. But I think that gets to the heart of what we're talking about here.
So,
Okay, just to sort of move on a little bit then, I just wanted to ask you a little about win-loss ratios on quotes and getting a handle on the logic of what buyers are talking about.
yeah, again, the beautiful thing with actually a pricing software and using a software rather than the old-fashioned longhand is that you can quite quickly see which customers are actually using you as a dipstick. To actually, I've got to be careful here. When does a customer become a customer? Well, a customer is someone who actually spends money with me, not who comes and asks for a quote. And we've all had them where they regularly come to you and actually maybe of the 10 quotes that you give, only one is actually picked up on and one is actually used. So, it's time. It's time that we have to account for and really is never shown on the bottom line. It's just lost production time, if you like. So a customer is only a customer when they've actually paid. If I'm honest, that's the simple process. But the quotation process for me is also an education process. So I've had conversations now with reasonable size sign companies who buy product in from a number of the trade suppliers, and a number of the trade suppliers have now said, "I don't want to quote you anymore." And I've kind of been staggered by the comment, and then I've asked why, and they've said, "Well, because we get them to quote everything that we do." So you're only getting 1 in 9 of the jobs that you quote for the customer. You're getting the supplier to do the same for you. So that ratio is even worse. If that makes sense. So how much time are they wasting giving you quotes? They're now making a commercial decision based on how much work they're winning from you. And I'd argue that you're not doing enough homework at the front end to find out what your customer needs if you're only getting one job in 9 quotes or 10 quotes that you actually give them. So again, this is the process of actually going into more detail with your client, what they actually need, and actually having that conversation with the client. You seem to come to me quite regularly, but you very rarely buy from me.
Yeah. Are you just using me as a sounding board to go and get some money off your usual supplier?
From somebody else. The reason that we often got, and again, I'll use the analogy of being at Science Express, because we processed a lot of what we did, we were often the first company back with a quote. So they would then go off to their team. This is the budget we need to work for. Go and beat it. So we were being used, to provide information, and and I suspect that happens to a lot of us when we don't actually know. And that's why I'm saying look at your quote ratio, look at your win loss, look at the clients who regularly use you. And actually, we all have clients again who just get on with it. I need this job done. We'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
About price. They're the crown jewels, if you like.
Well, that's relationships, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we've hit on a nerve with Sam, and she's responded to this one as well. Particularly annoyed when clients copy in 10 suppliers on the same request. I mean, that's shocking, actually. And if you can see the other people that are booking,
and Sam's right. It's lazy, and actually, I would go back to the client. Well, if you've got 10 of us, with the greatest respect, I'm stepping away.
Yeah.
And and if more of us actually did that, we need to be looking out for each other. I'm not saying we have to form a cartel, because that's wrong. But what we do not want is this horrible race to the bottom. The fact is that we want to be able to go and cherry pick some of our clients. We want our clients to come back to us because they trust us. So that's that whole relationship chain with the supplier. And the fact is, if a supplier is now saying to you, or if the supplier is not coming back to you, I suspect it's because they've looked at their win-loss ratio and actually are not getting much from you, and they've got other people that they prefer to get a quote out to quicker and better and sharper.
Well, I think there's lots of good advice in there, Craig. Thank you very much. We've gone our half hour. We said we'd keep this one to half an hour because we are sort of testing the process, but it seems to work. That's some good feedback. A few people online watching, which is great. And we'll also we'll record this and we'll put it online later. So if you weren't able to see it, you'll see it again at a later date. But thanks very much for your time.
I think you've got your 10-minute countdown. I'm going to correct you there. Look.
If you want to keep going, that's fine.
No,
But,
no,
no.
I'm fine. If anyone had any more questions, I'm like I said, the idea of the
Yeah,
surgery is actually to kind of give feedback on the stuff that's coming through. My
absolutely.
concern was that I was starting to see a pattern of issues that people were having and frustration that was
Yeah,
actually creeping in, and it's something that, again, the idea of actually having a sounding board, being able to speak to somebody, that no, you're not alone, but kind of, start to look at the information that you have available. Information is king. If you've got facts you can deal with, it's actually easier to address than them trying to surmise or guess.
absolutely. And that's what we're here for. Well, thanks very much again. And we'll see you next time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.